She left New York behind to find peace in Japan's countryside. What she found instead was worship. 6 months missing, declared dead, then suddenly reappears. Living in a secretive cult who believed she was the reincarnation of a mountain goddess. But as truth unravels, her divinity comes with a deadly condition. Why did she vanish again just days after escaping? Was she truly a victim? Or did she choose to become something else? The air was crisp the day Emily Harper disappeared. The sun filtered gently through the cedar trees of Nagano Prefecture as she boarded a local train to what she called in her last vlog entry a quiet temple town off the map. That was April 17th. No one saw or heard from her again. Her phone stopped pinging towers, her Instagram went silent, and her travel insurance flagged her location as undetermined. Emily was supposed to check in with her best friend, Rachel, back in New York that evening. The message never came. At first, people assumed she'd simply gone offline. After all, she often spoke about disconnecting to reconnect in her blog entries. But as hours became days and days stretched into weeks, the tone around Emily's disappearance shifted from curiosity to concern, and finally, to dread. Japanese authorities began their search in the region surrounding the train station where she was last seen. Locals reported seeing a blonde foreigner hiking toward the mountains, clutching a notebook and a thermos. A few said she asked questions about an old temple lost in the trees. But beyond vague descriptions, there was nothing solid. Search teams combed the area with drones and dogs. Her parents flew in from Michigan, desperate for any clue. American consular officials got involved, and soon, her case was international news. American influencer disappears in Japanese mountains. Candlelight vigils were held across social media. Her YouTube subscribers trawled through her final posts for hidden messages, timestamps, any indication of where she might have gone. Nothing. Her last photo showed only a foggy forest and a caption, "The silence here is deeper than death. I think I finally understand." 6 months passed. With no body, no witnesses, and no signs of struggle, the case grew cold. Her parents returned to the US brokenhearted. Her friend Rachel kept Emily's Instagram alive in hopes she'd return. But the world moved on. That is, until a new image shocked the internet. A photograph posted by an obscure Polish photographer, Lucas Novak, of a mural deep inside a mountain shrine near Mount Fuji. The mural depicted a pale-skinned woman with golden hair, robed in white, seated atop a lotus as dozens bowed before her. Beside her face was a single kanji, Megami, or goddess. The resemblance to Emily Harper was unmistakable. The image exploded online. Reddit threads lit up, theories abounded. Was it Emily? A centuries-old prophecy? A Photoshop hoax? Lucas, unaware of the viral storm he had ignited, gave a single interview where he described finding the shrine by accident after getting lost on a foggy hike. He said the temple was quiet, too quiet, and that the monks smiled without blinking. Within hours, internet sleuths matched the symbols in the painting to those found in ancient texts about a secret sect of monks in the Akigahara region, known in legends as the Flame That Awakens. According to lore, this cult believed in the return of a celestial being who would save them from the curse of the mountain. Suddenly, Emily's case was reopened, not just by law enforcement, but by thousands of armchair investigators, podcasters, and online conspiracy theorists. A new question now haunted every thread. If Emily was still alive, did she want to be found? The US Embassy in Tokyo announced it would support a renewed investigation, but Japanese officials remained tight-lipped. Most dismissed the cult theory as foreign imagination. Yet behind closed doors, whispers spread among senior investigators about a village in the mountains untouched by time, where outsiders who wander in never return. As pressure mounted, one private investigator named Kenji Iwata decided to take the case on his own, driven by a clue everyone else had missed: the symbol beneath the mural, an old kanji character once used by a banned religious sect long thought extinct. A sect whose beliefs included ritual fire, divine sacrifice, and immortality. Before she became the face of an international mystery, Emily Harper was just another overworked marketing executive lost in the crowd of Manhattan's glass towers. She was the type who never missed a deadline, rarely took vacations, and lived on oat milk lattes and second-hand affirmations. Friends would describe her as put together, but behind her curated social media feed and polite laughs at networking events was a woman quietly unraveling. The true fracture came not from burnout but from tragedy, when her younger brother, Ryan, died in a motorcycle accident on a rainy Tuesday afternoon. He was only 21. Emily had been supposed to meet him for dinner that night. Instead, she was caught in a meeting that ran long, arguing with a client about font choices. By the time she reached the hospital, he was gone. She never forgave herself. She never looked at time the same way again. In the weeks that followed, grief became an uninvited roommate. She stopped finding joy in anything. Food tasted like ash, her job felt meaningless, and her once vibrant New York apartment became a cave of silence. She tried therapy, meditation, even booked a luxury retreat in Arizona that promised soul recalibration. None of it worked. On the surface, she returned to her life, but inside, she had already begun to disappear. She started reading obscure books on Eastern philosophy and watching documentaries about ancient rituals and forgotten sects. Something about those stories, their reverence for nature, their belief in cycles, in life after life, spoke to the raw wound inside her. She wasn't looking for escape. She was looking for meaning. One night, drunk on cheap wine and insomnia, she booked a one-way ticket to Japan. No itinerary. No plan. Just a burning need to vanish and rebuild. She told her job she was taking a sabbatical, told her friends she needed a break to find herself, and told her parents as little as possible. Ryan had once joked about hiking through Japan's forests with nothing but a camera and a notebook. She decided to take the trip he never got to. In his honor. Or maybe to chase his ghost. Emily arrived in Tokyo wide-eyed and unmoored. The crowds, the neon, the precision of the trains, it all overwhelmed her at first. But soon, she settled into a rhythm. She began documenting her journey under the handle at Harper Unfiltered, sharing quiet moments rather than tourist hotspots. A tea shop run by an elderly couple who didn't speak English but welcomed her with warm rice cakes, a night spent in a capsule hotel listening to rainfall on plastic roofs, a morning hike where a wild deer stared at her like it knew all her secrets. Her following grew slowly, mostly other women searching for stillness in a world that never stopped moving. But for Emily, the posts weren't about attention. They were about anchoring herself. Every photo, every story, was a breadcrumb in case she ever wanted to find her way back. But with each passing town, she felt herself detaching further from the world she'd left behind. She stopped responding to emails. Skipped calls. Her journal entries shifted from reflections to riddles. If I shed my name, would I still belong to anyone? She grew fascinated with local folklore, especially tales from remote villages that believed mountains housed spirits and lost souls. One entry from her notebook, later recovered from her abandoned hostel room, read, "They say some gods are born human but only realize it when they leave everything behind. Maybe grief is the door." Her last few days before vanishing were spent in the Nagano region, where she reportedly visited ancient hot springs and spoke to a monk who handed her a pamphlet titled The Silence That Speaks. The monk didn't appear in any temple registry and no other travelers remembered seeing him. The pamphlet contained a hand-drawn map leading deep into the mountains and a poem, "Where the fire sleeps, the goddess wakes. Step through ash to see your face." Authorities later dismissed it as the product of a wandering mind, but Rachel swore Emily sounded calm for the first time in years during their final video call. It began with a stumble, both literal and metaphorical. Lucas Novak, a reclusive travel photographer known more for his drone shots of abandoned Soviet hospitals than for spiritual revelations, had veered off the official path while exploring the edges of Akigahara, Japan's infamous Sea of Trees. The forest had always held a sinister allure. Its reputation as a suicide hotspot made it both feared and mythologized, but Lucas wasn't after darkness. He was chasing light. Mist had begun to curl low across the forest floor when he spotted the crumbling stone steps buried beneath moss and centuries of silence. Curiosity overruled caution. He followed them deeper into the trees, where the air grew colder and heavier, like wading into a different era. That's when he saw it, a wooden torii gate half swallowed by ivy, and beyond it, a shrine that looked long forgotten by the modern world. Its doors stood ajar, groaning softly as wind pressed against them like unseen fingers. Inside, It was eerily pristine. Dust floated in golden beams of light that pierced through cracked slats. Strange artifacts adorned the room: bone-colored statues, rusted lanterns, and, dominating the far wall, a massive mural painted directly onto the stone. The figure at its center was unmistakable: a woman, pale-skinned and golden-haired, robed in white silk, sitting serenely while villagers prostrated at her feet. Lucas' swarthy eyes in the painting followed him. Above the woman's head was a halo of flame, and below it, a symbol he couldn't interpret but felt like it pulsed. He raised his camera and took a single photo before the battery died without warning. Shaken, he turned and left. He wouldn't realize until he returned to his hotel what he had captured. The photo uploaded to his cloud backup overnight. He thought little of it until the next morning when an email with the subject line "Who is she?" landed in his inbox from an anonymous sender. Attached was a side-by-side comparison of his photo and a headshot of Emily Harper. From there, it snowballed. Reddit forums exploded with side-by-side breakdowns of facial features. YouTubers dissected the image frame by frame, pointing out the unique scar above the left eyebrow that Emily had mentioned getting in childhood. It wasn't just a resemblance, it was nearly photographic. Lucas, unnerved by the attention, did a single podcast interview where he claimed the shrine had no marked trails, no signage, and seemed to hum with some frequency you felt in your bones, not ears. He refused to go back. The mural's discovery reopened Emily's case with international fervor. The Tokyo Metropolitan Police, already skeptical of Western sensationalism, dismissed the photo as digitally manipulated. But in Nagano, one detective took interest. Kenji Iwata was a 49-year-old with a reputation for chasing legends just as hard as he chased facts. His own sister had vanished in the mountains decades earlier, and though he never said it aloud, he believed some places swallowed people on purpose. He studied the photo and recognized the obscure symbol beneath the mural, a derivative of a long-banned religious icon associated with a sect known in records only as Hibana no Mezame, or the Awakening Flame. The group was believed to have been wiped out during the Edo period after accusations of human sacrifice. But cults don't die, he thought. They go underground. Iwata traced satellite images of the Akigahara region, cross-referencing Lucas's metadata with historical records. To his surprise, multiple disappearances, mostly Japanese women, a few foreign hikers, had occurred within a 15-kilometer radius of where Lucas claimed to have entered the woods. None had been resolved. He requested permission to investigate further, but was denied. The area was officially uninhabited. Unofficially, he knew that meant inconvenient. So he went anyway, alone, retracing the steps from Lucas's fragmented GPS logs. After 2 days in the forest, enduring sleepless nights and phantom whispers in the trees, Iwata found the same steps. The shrine, however, was different. Cleaner. More guarded. The mural was gone. In its place was a blank wall and a faint smell of something recently burned. But outside, hidden beneath a loose stone, he discovered a piece of charred paper with a single line of English written in a woman's handwriting: "Don't try to find me. I'm safe." It was unsigned, but he recognized the rounded cursive from Emily's journal scans. He pocketed it and left before he was noticed. Word of Iwata's unofficial discovery reached Rachel through a journalist contact. She released Emily's final unreleased video blog, recorded 2 days before her disappearance. In it, Emily is sitting in a forest clearing, bathed in morning light, her voice calm. She talks about how sometimes death isn't an ending, but a doorway. She smiles faintly and says, "If you're seeing this, maybe I've gone where I was meant to go." The video, titled Into the Flame, ends with her turning toward the trees and whispering something the MIC doesn't catch. Lip readers across the internet insisted she said, "They're calling me." Theories proliferated. Some claimed Emily had been brainwashed. Others said she found peace in a cult that worshipped her. A few believed she had simply gone mad from grief and isolation. But one fringe theory gained traction: that Emily had fulfilled a prophecy older than the country itself, and that she hadn't just been accepted into the cult, she'd been chosen by it. By the time Kenji Iwata reached the fringes of the mountain village known only in whispered references as Hino Soto, the village of Flame, Emily Harper had long since forgotten who she was. The Emily who once fought for client contracts, posted sunrise photos, and mourned a brother lost to wet pavement and bad timing was buried beneath layers of incense smoke, ceremonial robes, and the reverent eyes of those who now called her Amaterasu no Megami, the reincarnation of the sun goddess. The villagers had found her unconscious at the base of a narrow cliff after what they believed was a divine fall from the ridge, her body cradled in wildflowers and her head haloed in blood. When she woke, speaking fragmented English and suffering from what local healers called soul fracture, they interpreted it not as trauma but as transformation. A spirit shedding its past self. They told her she had returned to them, just as the ancient texts promised. That the prophecy had said she would come from the west, carried on sorrow and silence, to deliver balance to a world rotting from modern decay. That she would be reborn in pain, remember nothing, and gradually grow into her light once more. Emily, disoriented and desperate for warmth, clung to their kindness like a drowning woman to driftwood. And so the illusion became reality, not all at once, but in steady, intimate layers. Her days became a rhythm of rituals, morning chants by the fire pit, silent walks through pine-shadowed paths, the washing of feet by women who wept when they touched her hands. They fed her, clothed her, sang to her. There were no phones, no clocks, no names beyond what the flame decreed. And in the absence of noise, Emily began to hear herself, or at least, what they told her she was. Her hair was brushed by hand each morning, her meals served in carved stone bowls. She was led in meditative dances under full moons, adorned with crimson sashes, and given a room of woven tatami that looked out onto a lake she was told only the divine were allowed to see. No one entered without permission, and none touched her skin without bowing first. In time, she stopped asking questions. When flickers of her past rose, images of New York subways, her brother's laugh, the cold sharpness of corporate air conditioning, she dismissed them as dreams from another lifetime. The cult didn't need chains or locked doors. They used worship as a prison. And Emily, worn raw from her past, didn't resist the captivity. She embraced it. Kenji's arrival in the village was not announced. It wasn't permitted. He infiltrated the region through the cover of dusk, guided by an aging map etched into an old woodblock print. The closer he got, the stranger the terrain became. Roads narrowed into trails, trails vanished into fog, and at one point, his compass spun in circles. He saw villagers in white robes walking in perfect silence, barefoot across ash-stained soil. They ignored him completely. He felt as though he'd stepped into a dream, or a place that actively denied reality. At the center of the settlement stood a towering cedar temple, its upper beams wrapped in crimson cloth, the same hue painted on Emily's lips in ceremonial photos taken in secret by a drone weeks prior. He knew she was here. The question was, did she know who she was? Kenji posed as a pilgrim seeking healing. He was brought to an elder known only as the Keeper, a man with cataract-clouded eyes who spoke in metaphors and proverbs but rarely blinked. Through subtle questions, Kenji learned the cult's inner mythology. They believed that once every generation, the mountain would call forth a bearer of flame, a woman marked by loss and chosen to burn away the impurities of the modern world through divine sacrifice. The last bearer had died 70 years prior, willingly walking into a pyre during the solstice as villagers wept in rapture. Her ashes were believed to nourish the soil, bless the harvest, and delay the end of days. And now, they believed, their next bearer had arrived. Emily. By the time Kenji finally saw her, she was standing barefoot in the temple courtyard, surrounded by acolytes singing in low, trembling voices. Her face was serene, almost ethereal, eyes closed, arms raised toward the morning light. He felt a pang of disbelief. She looked nothing like the girl from the photos. No jeans, no backpack, no nervous smile. She looked like someone who had never existed outside this world. But then, just before she turned to go inside, her eyes met his. For a moment, something flickered. Confusion. Recognition. Pain. Then it was gone. Kenji was captured that night. They found his badge hidden inside his boot. He was bound with silken cords and kept in a dim chamber beneath the temple, where incense burned constantly and chanting never ceased. He was not tortured, only observed. The keeper visited him once, kneeling beside him to whisper, "She was lost. We gave her purpose. Why would you take that from her?" Kenji didn't respond. He was focused on one thing, getting a message to Emily before the solstice ceremony. He had less than 2 weeks. Meanwhile, Emily began dreaming in English. Snippets of songs her brother loved, phrases her mother used, the smell of Manhattan bagels and subway metal. The past was leaking in. During one sunrise ceremony, a child placed a drawing at her feet, a crude crayon image of her walking into fire, smiling as people wept. That night, she stood at the lake's edge and saw her reflection flicker between 2 faces. The goddess. And herself. She began to remember. The chants grew louder each night, more fervent, more urgent. The village pulsed with an invisible electricity as the summer solstice approached, its arrival marked by the rising of twin moons in the sky. One celestial, the other metaphorical, drawn in blood and ash on the central temple doors. Emily, still draped in silk and silence, began to feel the weight of her title crack under the pressure of truth. Memories now came without invitation, unfiltered, visceral, and cruel in their timing. She remembered the sound of her brother's laughter echoing down the hallway of their childhood home. She remembered the burn of streetlight against rain-slicked asphalt on the night she got the news of his death. And she remembered, above all, that she had once been someone who knew her name. But now, that name was a threat. She didn't tell anyone that the dreams had changed. That they were no longer tranquil visions of harmony and celestial warmth, but fire-drenched nightmares where she stood in the center of a roaring inferno while the villagers around her danced and cried with joy. In one dream, she looked down at her hands and saw that they were glowing, not with divinity, but with the oil and wick of a human torch. The keeper began to speak to her in riddles sharpened like blades. He reminded her that rebirth only comes after the fire. That even the sun must burn to give light. That sacrifice is not loss but the highest form of devotion. One evening, after a private ritual that left her dizzy and raw, Emily found herself escorted to a chamber deeper in the mountain temple, one she'd never been allowed to enter. It was circular, stone-lined, and eerily cold. At its center stood an altar blackened by soot. Around it, faded paintings of women with golden hair, each depicted in the same final posture, kneeling before flames. A large scroll hung from the ceiling, written in a dialect she had come to recognize only through repetition. One word stood out, repeated over and over, Haifuku, to clothe in flame. It wasn't until a girl named Suna, barely 16, whispered to her after the ceremony that Emily finally understood. Suna had slipped into her room, hands shaking, eyes wide with a truth she could no longer contain. She told Emily about the last bearer, the girl chosen 70 years prior. She told her how the village had loved her too, revered her, kissed the ground she walked on. And how, when the solstice arrived, they wrapped her in ceremonial robes soaked in oil and placed her atop a funeral pyre disguised as a throne. They say she smiled until the end, Suna whispered. They say it's an honor. But I saw her eyes. She was screaming without sound. Emily didn't sleep that night. Instead, she paced in the dark, heart pounding as centuries of illusion cracked around her. It had never been about salvation. It had been about spectacle. She wasn't their goddess. She was their matchstick. A symbol to be lit and consumed for the sake of a story they needed to believe. And now, the entire village had pinned their future on her ignition. Without her sacrifice, they believed the crops would fail, sickness would return, and their forgotten flame would die in obscurity. She was their final insurance policy. Their holy fuel. Meanwhile, Kenji remained imprisoned, his strength fading with each passing hour. The incense in his cell was laced with something that dulled his senses and clouded his memory. But he clung to the image of Emily, her face from the courtyard, that fleeting glance of recognition. He knew she was waking up. He scratched words into the stone wall with a nail he'd hidden in his sleeve, repeating them like a mantra. You are not a flame. You are not theirs. On the third night, Suna snuck into his chamber under the pretense of prayer. She saw the words, recognized the truth in them, and made a decision that would change everything. She smuggled Kenji a piece of charcoal and a strip of ceremonial cloth. With it, he wrote a note to Emily in the only language that still bound them, memory. Ryan wouldn't want this, it read. You are not the fire. You are the one who walks through it. Suna delivered it beneath the cover of ritual preparation. Emily found it folded beneath her ceremonial sandals, placed with shaking hands just before the final purification rite. When she read it, something snapped into place. Her brother's name was the key. No one in the village knew it. Only someone from her world, her life, could have written it. And that meant Kenji was here. Alive. Fighting for her. For the first time in weeks, she remembered the subway rumble under Manhattan, the thrum of jazz from a corner bar, the smell of cinnamon rolls at dawn. Her world. Herself. It hadn't died. It had been buried. And she was ready to dig it out. The following morning, as the village prepared for the sacred burning, Emily stood before the mirror and painted her own face, not in the village's ceremonial white, but in streaks of black and crimson, war paint drawn from instinct. She folded the note and tucked it into her robe, close to her heart. If she was going to burn, she would choose the flame. Or extinguish it. The night of the solstice came cloaked in an almost supernatural stillness, the kind that presses against the ribs and makes even breath feel too loud. The villagers moved through the ceremonial grounds like apparitions, draped in red and gold, their feet silent against the earth that had been swept and blessed and salted. At the heart of the temple courtyard stood the altar pyre, an intricate structure of cedarwood and woven reeds soaked in sacred oils, its base surrounded by offerings of rice, dried lotus petals, and shards of obsidian. It rose like a throne and a tomb combined, built not just for ritual but for spectacle. Above it, a massive tapestry fluttered in the mountain breeze, embroidered with the likeness of the goddess returned, Emily's face, stylized and eternal. The keeper stood before it, arms raised, chanting words lost to time. The sky above was an open canvas of stars, each one bearing silent witness to what was about to unfold. Emily walked through the crowd like a ghost among believers. The air was thick with incense, but her senses were sharp, her awareness honed to the fine edge of a blade. She had not slept. Her robe billowed behind her like smoke. The note was still tucked against her chest. Every step forward felt like a choice, a dare, a statement. The people bowed as she passed, tears in their eyes, hands pressed to their chests. They believed they were about to witness divinity made flesh. They had no idea that the goddess in front of them had remembered she was human. And humans, unlike gods, can rebel. As she approached the pyre, the drummers began their final rhythm, slow and thunderous, echoing across the valley. Flames flickered at the pyre's base, not yet lit but alive in anticipation. The keeper stepped forward, offering her the final blessing, a kiss to the forehead and a whisper only she could hear, "You will complete us." Emily nodded, took his hand, and then broke protocol. She looked out over the gathered faces and spoke. Loud. Clear. In English. "This is not salvation," she said. "It's sacrifice. And I'm not your flame." Confusion rippled through the crowd, then panic. The drumming stopped. Murmurs surged like a wave. The keeper turned to the crowd, shouted for calm, raised his staff. But Emily was already moving. From beneath her robe, she pulled the flint striker she had stolen from the purification chamber. She struck it once, twice, then hurled it into the base of the pyre. The oil caught instantly. Flames roared upward, consuming the structure in seconds. Screams erupted. Some fell to their knees in anguish, others fled into the woods, clutching charms and beads. The tapestry caught last, her woven face melting into fire, unmaking the symbol they had built around her. And in the chaos, as smoke and sparks swallowed the courtyard, Emily vanished into the trees. Kenji was waiting. Suna had unlocked his cell hours earlier and led him through a passage known only to the inner circle. He limped, half-drugged and weak, but his mind was clear. When Emily emerged from the brush, covered in soot and wild-eyed, neither of them spoke. They ran. Branches clawed at them, roots threatened to trip them, but the mountain had lost its grip. Behind them, the flames rose higher than the trees. The cult, in their frenzy, had begun burning their own symbols, cleansing the false ending, convinced they had failed the ritual. The keeper's voice rang out in chants now stripped of purpose, echoing into a night that no longer belonged to him. It took them 2 days to reach the nearest village. They were gaunt, dehydrated, and nearly mute from exhaustion. A farmer spotted them near the edge of his rice field and called authorities. The moment Emily gave her name, everything shifted. News stations scrambled for footage. Helicopters circled. The embassy made contact. She was given water, medical care, a clean bed. But she didn't sleep. When they asked what happened, she said she didn't remember. When they asked about the cult, the village, the pyre, she said it was a dream. Kenji backed her up. The official report described them as survivors of extreme isolation and psychological trauma, with little recollection of events. She was flown home under heavy security. Cameras waited at the airport. Flashbulbs exploded. Questions were hurled like rocks. Where were you? Were you brainwashed? Are you the goddess? She said nothing. Rachel met her at the terminal, crying and trembling. They embraced. For a moment, Emily felt like herself again. But only for a moment. 2 weeks later, she vanished again. Her parents woke up to an empty guest room and a note on the pillow. Don't look for me. I'm safe. I'm free. No digital trail. No credit card use. No activity. Rachel posted a final video to Emily's channel, a soft goodbye set to slow piano, filled with footage of forests, temples, and sunrises. It ended with the words, "Some flames are not meant to be extinguished. They are meant to walk away." To this day, theories abound. Some say Emily joined another spiritual commune. Others claim she returned to the mountain to finish what was interrupted. A few insist she died that night, and the woman who walked away was something else entirely. Her photo still circulates online, now blurred and faded, used in articles about cults, about mental health, about identity. But the truth remains elusive. What really happened in that village may never be fully known. What's left behind is only the question, and a name whispered by those who still believe, Amaterese no Megami. The goddess who came, who burned, and who walked out of the fire not consumed, but changed.